Thank you for joining us today. This is a special online program hosted by the Mirowitz Center, and my name is Laura Bryant. Special shout out, by the way, to the Mirowitz Center, who also has a special gathering there. Our guide today is Elana Kaplan, former St. Louisan and an independent museum educator and lecturer. She was an educator at the Metropolitan Museum of Art for 25 years and currently leads private tours at the Met and other museums, as well as virtual tours for groups around the globe. Today, Elana covers part 3 of our 3-part winter series. In December, Elana shared the beauty and history of American stained glass windows. Last month in January, she helped us shake off the winter chill, and boy, we had a lot of chill, with cozy American interiors. And this month, she's helping us honor Black History Month with a program about modern storytellers whose lives intersected with the Harlem community. So please help me welcome Elana, and thank you for joining us again today.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Laura. And it's great to see everyone back. I'm really excited about this program um, on these 3 African American artists that some of you might be more or less familiar with. And what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about the artists and their background because their background very much is central to the art that they made. And we'll also talk about their medium, their method, their biographies. And I think we'll all learn a lot and gain a new appreciation for these 3 artists. So I am going to start with my PowerPoint. Okay, so we're talking about modern storytellers, Romare Bearden, Jacob Lawrence, and Faith Ringgold. And these 3 artists, as we'll see, all 3 of them spent time in Harlem, and their experiences in Harlem and as African American artists really informs their artwork. And each one of them also has a very unique way of making art, and their medium is very unique. So we're going to explore that as well. So intertwined with looking at the art, I'm also going to tell about their background, their history, their process, because it's, I think, very important and very central to the art that they created. So the 3 artists, this is Romare Bearden. And just to give you an idea of their time periods when they lived, he was born in 1911 in Charlotte, North Carolina, and he died in 1988 in New York City when he was 76. And his family moved to Harlem when he was young. So he spent time growing up in Harlem, which we'll talk about. And on the left is Jacob Lawrence. He was born in 1917 in Atlantic City, New Jersey. He died in the year 2000 when he was 82. He also grew up in Harlem. And on the right, we have Faith Ringgold. She's a little younger. She was born in 1930 in Harlem, and she died just in 2024 in Englewood, New Jersey. Not far from where I lived, and she was 93 when she passed away. Um, and so we're going to focus on these 3 artists, and they did artworks spanning many different subject matter, including historical, political, religious. But we're really going to focus on their artwork that focuses on the rituals of everyday life and specifically mostly about life in Harlem. So in 1951, Jacob Lawrence, who you see on left, made a statement about his work that could hold true in reflecting on each of these 3 modern storytellers. And this is his quote. Quote, "For me, a painting should have 3 things: universality, clarity, and strength. Universality so that it could be understood by all men, clarity and strength so that it may be aesthetically good." In each case, these 3 artists use their African American heritage and their expression of Black identity as fundamental to their artistic expression. All 3 of these artists grew up or trained or lived at various points in their lives in Harlem, and they very much participated in the Harlem community, as we'll see in their artwork. And all 3 of them, whatever the subject matter of their individual work of art, convey an underlying social commentary about human identity seen through the prism of race and class. Lawrence again sums it up, and we're actually going to see a video in a few minutes with Jacob Lawrence talking in his own words. But something else that he said that I think is very important for our talk today is Quote, most of my work depicts events from the many Harlems that exist throughout the United States. This is my genre, my surroundings, the people I know, the happiness, the tragedies, and the sorrows of mankind. I am part of the Black community, so I am the Black community speaking. And as we'll see in our artwork today, we're going to see all those things he talked about. We'll see the tragedies, we'll see the sorrows, and we'll also see the happiness in all the works of art today. Now, the subject matter of these three artists has incredible range from the heroic to the mundane. And again, what's very interesting about these three artists also is their medium and their process. So just looking at the pictures, tell you a little bit about their medium because they're shown with their works of art. So this is Romare Bearden. He is well known for collage art. That's the type of art that he made. He would cut out newspapers, magazines. He would paint papers and cut them out. And he was very well known for collage, which is a very unique art form for an artist. And again, I have short video clips of each of these artists because I think it's important to see them creating their art as well. So we'll see later on a video of Romare Bearden with making his collage. And then Jacob Lawrence that we have on the left, he was a painter, but he used watercolor, tempera, and poster paints, which are not the paint that we most associate with well-known artists. Usually artists use oil paints. So, but he used those paints because those are the materials he used as a young boy growing up in Harlem and painting, and he wanted to stay true to his heritage, to growing up. And he also said those type of paints, they're hard and brittle, but vivacious and colorful, and that's how he described life in Harlem. So he stayed very true to those materials. And Faith Ringgold that we have in the picture on the right with her work of art behind her, she did quilting. She made painted quilts. She also did paintings and she made jewelry and other things, but she was most well known for her painted quilts. So she was a quilt artist, and that was also based on her heritage and her background. Her mother was a well-known dress designer. Her grandmother did quilting. So this was very much an art form that was passed down to her. So each of these artists is very unique in their art form, and we'll look at how they represent everyday life in Harlem through their works of art and through their specific medium. All three of these artists were well trained in art history and technique, and they each assimilated many different things in their artwork: historical art, modernism, African art, and also folk and craft traditions. And they used all those things in developing their own personal expressions. Jacob Lawrence and Romare Bearden both came of age just after the Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s. Bearden's family was actually very prominent in the community, and many figures in the Harlem Renaissance were regular visitors to their home, including Langston Hughes, Duke Ellington, Fats Waller, and Paul Robeson. And these encounters would resonate in his work. Jacob Lawrence's family moved to Harlem in 1930. So he grew up in Harlem, and as a boy, he participated in workshops at the Utopia Children's House. And as students, both Bearden and Lawrence took various community-based art projects. They went to schools and workshops, including the Harlem Art Workshop at the New York Public Library's 135th Street branch and at the Harlem Artists Guild at 137th Street's YMCA. So Jacob Lawrence and Romare Bearden knew each other. They studied together. They also had a studio in the same building in Harlem at various points. So they all three of these artists knew each other and were familiar with each other's art. Jacob Lawrence was technically trained and educated in Harlem. And so he you'll see in his art that he really represented Harlem in a lot of his works of art. Romare Bearden, just in terms of his studying, he studied outside of Harlem, not just in Harlem. He went to Lincoln College near Philadelphia. Then he went to Boston University. And then finally he went to New York University. And after college, he attended the New York's Art Students League. And he actually did a lot of studying and a lot of pedagogy focused on the careful analysis of old masters, and that would influence Bearden's work. He studied a lot the Dutch masters, and that had a great influence of his work. And specifically, he incorporated what he learned about the artists Bruegel, Vermeer, and De Hooch. And finally, Faith Ringgold, in terms of her educational background, she studied at City College in New York. And she coupled her training in the techniques of Western art with immersion in the art of Africa. But for her family, for all these artists, their family experience really resonated. Faith Ringgold's father was a minister and he was a gifted storyteller. So she incorporated that into her art. She has vivid memories of listening to his spirited anecdotes with their wealth of detail and variations on a theme. That was her father. But her mother also would tell stories, but her mother also was a well-known dress designer. Her mother's name was Willie Posey. She was a well-known dress designer. So she had a family tradition in needlework and cloth. And her mother actually was a collaborator on some of her work. And also her grandmother was a quilter. So Faith Ringgold coupled her studies in art history together with her family experience to create her work of art. So these three modern storytellers share affinities in their communication strategies and in their drive to use non-traditional media. As I pointed out, they each use non-traditional media. And some of their art is very folksy and very exuberant in expression. And so just to remind everyone of their non-traditional media, Romare Bearden was a collage artist. Jacob Lawrence was a painter using watercolor and tempera and poster paints, which he referred to as more unsophisticated materials. And Faith Ringgold did quilting. Okay, so with that background on the artists, I want to, before we look at our paintings, I want to start off with a short video clip about Jacob Lawrence. We're actually going to see short video clips which show each of these three artists, because I think it's important to hear them speak in their own words, to see some of their other works of art. We're just going to look at about 4 to 5 works of art of each of these artists. So by watching these videos, you'll see other works of art that they made. And I think you get a real feel for the artist by hearing them speak in their own voice. So we'll watch about 4 minutes of this video. If anyone's interested in watching the rest, I can send Laura the link that she can send out.
If everything was stripped away from me and I had no other support that I could see or appreciate, I would still paint. I would still be doing that.
Jacob Lawrence's work celebrates the human quality in man. It celebrates the things that we can do to better our condition. And it celebrates our heroes.
Jacob Lawrence really with that splash, the dash, the right angle, you know, that really says something. The pictures of the juke house experiences, the blues cycles, his whole aesthetic about how he sees us as a people is glorious.
And what he tells a person in coming in off the street is that your life is important. And it's important to remember something about where we've come from, and this is capturing a part of history.
He focuses on liberation and does it in the way that a person would do it on a daily basis, in small increments, as an individual, putting his commitment down on paper.
I don't think he's so much concerned about art as he is about life. There aren't many around like Jacob Lawrence.
Some have said my art is social commentary or it's protest. It couldn't be anything else if I grew up in the Harlem community and that was the source of my content, if you want to interpret it that way.
Jacob Lawrence has been painting for over 5 decades and has become one of America's foremost artists. His style has defied convention and fashion and remains unique. He is Professor Emeritus at the University of Washington in Seattle, where he and his wife, artist Gwendolyn Knight, have lived since 1971. Lawrence began painting in New York's Harlem community as a teenager during the 1930s. Federally funded arts workshops have helped sustain Harlem's long-established artistic vitality during the Depression. For the Lawrences, The workshops were stimulating.
This had a certain kind of magic to it that I was able to put something on paper, be able to put something on a two-dimensional picture plane that had some meaning. I couldn't put this into words because I was only 14, 15 years of age. But I think that was it, and that intrigued me, you know, putting black next to red. I could make decisions. Do I want to use this color or that color? And this was very, people like myself very rarely had the opportunity of making decisions, you see, so you could make decisions. So you were in a certain kind of control here, and it was a very constructive kind of a thing.
I think Jake just recorded what was there. And his early paintings are of the Harlem scene, what was there. Some of it was not pleasant. I guess a great deal of it was not pleasant because we didn't live in a society that was very pleasant. And he happened to be such a good artist that it was very moving, very touching, and very real.
Young artists, including Jacob.
Okay, so hopefully the video you saw all of his different paintings in the background and you got a little bit of a sense of style. You got to hear him speak and his wife speak. And I think that will help us gain a greater appreciation of his art that we're going to look at. Okay, so this is actually just showing you where both Jacob Lawrence and Romare Bearden spent a lot of time. This is the Harlem Art Guild at 137th Street YMCA, which is now the Schoenberg Center that you can visit today. And they both spent a lot of time here taking art classes and studying. And early on, Jacob Lawrence actually created several sweeping historical narratives in the form of extensive series paintings. So, and he did a lot of his research here, both at the 135th Street branch of the New York Public Library and also at the YMCA. And he really steeped himself in historical research to make these series paintings. So in the mid to late 1930s, he created works of art. First, he created works of art based on major historical figures in the anti-slavery movement. He did paintings of Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, and John Brown. And then he did this whole series, which I'm showing you just one painting of. It was a series called The Migration of the Negro. He did it between 1940 and 1941. It is jointly owned by the Museum of Modern Art, MoMA, and the Phillips Collection in Washington, D.C. And I specifically chose this work of art because you can see that it's Chicago, New York, St. Louis. And this was actually one painting in a series of over 60 panels. And it was all about as I said, the migration of the Negro, the migration of more than 1 million African Americans from the rural South to the industrial North between 1910 and 1940. And he did a series of 60 panels. It's conceived as an epic. And that was really his first works of art that he became very well known for. And that was done in 1940, 1941. He was only about 20 years old at the time when he did this series. Then he turned to history paintings, and then starting about 1942, he focused on paintings of Harlem, and that's really what he focused on throughout the rest of his time painting. And through those paintings, he investigated the most significant social issues of his community, including family values, the plight of the poor, and especially, as we'll see, the role of the manual laborer. The paintings that we're going to look at today are all from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and they all represent these different social issues that he was focusing on. Okay, so here's the first painting that we're going to be spending a lot of time on. And the way we're going to look at the paintings today is first we're going to look at the paintings by Jacob Lawrence, then the works of art by Romare Bearden, and finally the works of art by Faith Ringgold. And as we're looking at this painting and spend some time looking at, there's a lot going on here, and I'll describe the painting and I'll give you some background. But as you're looking at it, just let's notice Jacob Lawrence's style, which you probably saw in the video also with all the different paintings. You can see that he really uses a lot of shapes, flattened shapes, He uses opaque and highly saturated color, and there's a lot of distinctive patterning in his painting. Sometimes his paintings almost look like a storyboard. So we'll see a lot of repeated patterns. We'll see a lot of rhythm in his paintings. And also, I will tell you the materials he uses, but he uses a lot of either watercolor or tempera. And as I said, he referred to them as hard, brittle, and bright a hard, brittle, and bright medium. And he said similar to what life was like in Harlem during the Depression. So again, he uses mostly tempera, poster paints, water-based paints like watercolors. And these are the same materials that he used as a young boy in Harlem. And he kept his allegiance to these materials throughout his career. A lot of people say that these are considered more unsophisticated materials. But again, he wanted his works of art to be understood by every viewer, no matter their background. He wanted everyone to connect to his art, and he felt like if he used more unsophisticated materials rather than oil paints, which were associated with, maybe the artistic elite, he thought that more people could connect to his work of art more. And again, so his a lot of pattern, a lot of color, and the materials that he used, all very important for his works of art. Okay, so you had a few minutes to look at this painting. It's called The Photographer. He painted it in 1942. He was only 25 years old when he painted it. It's watercolor, and opaque watercolor. The dimensions are 22 and an eighth inch by 30 and a half inch. So we're looking here at a busy street in Harlem. It's bustling with activity. And you can see a lot of things that are going on here. We have construction workers in a manhole over here. We have someone carrying a garbage pail here. We have a truck where you can see the bottom of it with the wheels. Someone pushing a laundry cart right in the middle of the painting. We have someone, a horse-drawn cart carrying a brass bed frame. Perhaps someone's moving into the neighborhood. We also have a man here. Businessman looks like he's hurrying to work with his red briefcase. We have this red fire hydrant over here also. And so there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of color, there's a lot of hustle and bustle. Also, as you're looking at the painting, notice the diagonal lines, the angular shapes. And in the midst of all of this busyness on this Harlem street, we have the photographer. Okay, now you can't see his face because he's the old-fashioned photographer, so his head is under this cloth. And here's the camera that he's using, pulling the cord. Now this big white thing right in the middle of the white shape is the flash of the camera. And he's taking a picture. He's taking a group portrait of this well-dressed family. Here's the husband, the wife. The wife is wearing a red suit with a yellow pocketbook and a blue hat, and the young daughter in her white dress. And of course, the bright flash of the camera forms this very dynamic, abstract form right in the middle of the painting. So again, we're looking at the shapes, we're looking at the colors. And the other thing that's so interesting, I think, that Jacob Lawrence does here, and you'll see it throughout his paintings, but I'll point it out here, and then you'll recognize it in the other paintings we look at, is look how he uses the color red. So the color red, artists often use that color to get us to move our eyes around the painting because it's a very bright color. And here too, you move from the red of the fire hydrant, we have the red in the wheels of this truck, the red of the gate around the manhole. This woman is wearing red. This briefcase is a little bit of a darker red. His jacket's red. So it really gets us to move around the painting, see all the details. Really quite an amazing use of the color red. And also this scene is something that he would have experienced on a busy street in Harlem, but also the idea of the photographer, that's reminiscent of, they would have these itinerant portrait photographers who would practice their vocation on the streets of Harlem in the 1930s and 40s, and they would capture pictures, portraits, on the spot likenesses with their box cameras. And that's exactly what he's showing us here with the photographer and his box camera. Now, again, notice throughout with his paintings, his style, the elemental flattened shapes, the highly saturated color, and the distinctive patterning. A lot of repeating patterning. And again, Jacob Lawrence wants his works of art to be understood by any viewer, regardless of their background. He has very vibrant depictions of Harlem, as we're looking at here. And all these things we're talking about, you'll see in the next few paintings of Jacob Lawrence that we're going to look at. Okay, our next work of art is called Pool Parlor. And this was also done in 1942 when Jacob Lawrence was 25 years old. It's watercolor and opaque watercolor on paper, and it's 31 and an eighth inch by 22 and 7/8 inches. So again, Lawrence is really renowned for his visual interpretation of Black life and history, specifically focusing on life in Harlem. And this painting evokes a scene along Lenox Avenue, which is a central street in Harlem, and it was known for its many pool parlors. And that's exactly what he's showing us here. So the composition shows us a dimly lit room filled with these dark green pool tables. And look at, again, the shapes, the patterns, the colors that you can find in this painting. So we have these dark green pool tables punctuated with very bright colored billiard balls throughout. So the colors of the billiard balls, the shape of them, the pattern of them going throughout the painting. Then we have men focused very intently on this competitive and communal recreation. So we see a lot of men who are very actively playing pool in different positions. We also have a couple spectators here in the background who are looking on. And as you're looking at this, again, notice all the shapes, the colors, and the lines. I think the lines are just amazing how they intersect this painting. So we have, first of all, the black lines for these hanging lamps, right? So you see all these hanging lamps in this dimly lit room, and then the shape of the lamps, kind of the half circle. Then you also have the peach lines of the pool cues, which are just intersecting the painting in such an interesting way, and sometimes intersecting the black lines of the lamps. And then, so those are a lot of straight lines we're seeing, plus the straight lines of the pool table, the outlines of the pool table. And then look for the zigzag lines. So you'll notice, again, something that was very prevalent in the 1940s is the cigarettes. And we'll see this in other paintings as well. So if you look at a lot of the edge of the pool tables, you'll see cigarettes, and coming out of the cigarettes are the zigzag smoke. So the idea of, different lines, the patterns, the zigzag lines from the smoke versus the straight lines of the pool cues and the hanging lamps. So I think, the line, shape, and color of this composition is just quite remarkable. So this painting that we're looking at was actually the first painting by Jacob Lawrence that entered the Met's collection. The Met purchased this painting in 1942, just months after Jacob Lawrence painted it, and they purchased it as a prize winner for its Artists for Victory competition in 1942. And that was a celebratory exhibition of contemporary American art during World War II. This acquisition was a rare recognition of the talent of an artist of color by the museum at this time. I mean, that was 1942. So this was very a rare recognition of artists of color. Now, Jacob Lawrence had really become well known the year before, because the year before he had finished the Migration series, that 60-panel series that I started off with. He finished that only a year before he did this work of art, and that made him a very well-known artist. And because of that, he was able to sell a number of his paintings soon after he made this. So he painted this in 1942, and the Met purchased it in 1942. Okay, this is actually just a picture of Edith Halpert. This is Edith Halpert, and she was actually she owned a gallery. It was called the Downtown Gallery, and she represented Jacob Lawrence in the 1930s and 1940s. She also represented an artist named Ben Shahn, very well-known artist, but she actually helped launch Jacob Lawrence's career because she exhibited and promoted his work at her downtown gallery. She actually was the one who promoted his Migration series early on. She was a strong advocate for contemporary American artists, and she was one of the first dealers to exhibit artists of African and Asian descent. So she championed Jacob Lawrence. She sold a lot of his paintings, and that's how he was able to sell paintings. By the way, there was a very interesting exhibit about Edith Halpert a few years ago at the Jewish Museum. It was called Edith Halpert and the Rise of American Art. So she was very central in helping Jacob Lawrence sell his works of art and become a well-known artist. Okay, our next painting by Jacob Lawrence is called The Shoemaker. This one was done in 1945. It's also watercolor, and opaque watercolor, and it's 22 3/4 inches by 31 inches. So this painting was painted in December 1945. That was the same month that Jacob Lawrence returned from service in World War II. And it was among the first of a dozen paintings that he made over the course of the following year that were all focused on Black workers. So this one is owned by the Met. It's called The Shoemaker, but he did a whole series, about 12 paintings focused on the Black workers. I'll just give you a glimpse of some of the other ones, and then we'll come back to this one and look at it in depth. So part of that series was also this one, which is called The Steelworkers, that he did in 1946. He also did this one, The Barbers, in 1946. He did on stenographers, professors, but he did a whole series focusing on Black workers. And he was not interested in the division between intellectual and manual labor. And he made these paintings because he wanted to show the combination of technical skill, knowledge, resourcefulness, and ingenuity and dedication that allowed Black workers to create whatever they were making as workers. Even if they were in cramped spaces or confined conditions, they were still creating. So here we see a shoemaker, actually a cobbler, who really fills the space of his workshop. You can see that his shoulders almost touch the ceiling of his workshop. Notice the sharp angles of his shoulder, which kind of breaks the plane of the ceiling. And the ceiling almost seems to bear down on him. So even in these cramped workspaces, he's still able, you can see how much he's able to create, how much he's able to produce. And you can also notice how Jacob Lawrence, in his works of art, sometimes enlarges things or makes them smaller. Noticed his massive hands and his forearms, and that's focusing on that because that's his skill, right? He uses his arms, his hands to do his craft, and he's really focusing very much. Look at his eyes, focus very much on the intricate task at hand. Now it's also amazing to look at like the size of hands, which Jacob Lawrence is focusing on, again, the importance of his craft, compared to the shoes. And look at all the shoes that you can see in his cobbler shop. We see a wall of very brightly colored, jewel colored shoes. Some of them look like heels. Some of them are shiny loafers. Some of them are dancing shoes, very bright jewel colors, which seems to show his success, that he has all these shoes that he's working on, both the ones on the wall, hanging on the wall, also this jumble of shoes over here. It also symbols the world of abundance and leisure, which is made possible by his hard work. Now, this painting is something that Jacob Lawrence focused on also because it's something that he saw around him. He observed workplaces in Harlem, especially those surrounded around this area called 306, which was an art workshop and community gathering on 141st Street. Lawrence studied there as an artist apprentice in the 1930s, and many of these artist workshops doubled as repair shops. So they were both repair shops and artist workshops. And this shows Lawrence's attention to the importance of laborers in Harlem and their craft, which is very important. So, and again, today, as you're looking at these paintings, keep in mind that Lawrence today is considered one of the foremost innovators of modernism in the United States. He's a consummate storyteller, and he was really dedicated to the lives of Black people, of poor people. By 1945, by the time he did this series, he was an established presence in the emerging art world. Again, a lot due to Edith Halpert and his being represented at her gallery. And this series that he did from 1945 to 1946, these paintings of Black workers, was a new creative process for Lawrence, really focusing on Black workers. It was also a looser, more fluid theme. And this series was one that Edith Halpert, the gallerist, she very much liked this, and she marketed his paintings on a national stage, and his paintings met with great success. Jacob Lawrence was one of the only Black artists represented by a major New York gallery in the 1940s and 1950s. And because of that, many museums were interested in his work, many private collectors. For example, this painting, The Shoemaker, the Met acquired only months after it was completed. So the Met was purchasing Jacob Lawrence's paintings just months after he made them, which was a rare occurrence for artists of color at this time. Okay, we're going to look at, so this is, again, part of the series. And as we're looking at these paintings, again, keep in mind his style that we've been talking about, the bright colors. These are watercolors again, the patterns, the shapes that you see, the right angles. which they talked about in one of the videos we looked at, how we, very much included a lot of right angles and angular work in his works of art. And we'll see that throughout this series. Again, this is the Steelworkers, which is not at the Met, but I wanted to include a few more paintings in this series. Again, focusing on Black workers, the importance of their work, the color, the patterns that we're talking about. And here's the barbers. Again, something that Jacob Lawrence would have seen in Harlem, very important part of the community. And we'll see the importance of barbers and other in Romare Bearden's work of art also. But again, the color, and I haven't pointed out in each of the paintings, but notice the use of the color red throughout these paintings, again, to get us to move our eyes around these paintings, how he uses the color red. I didn't point it out, but in the pool parlor, the use of the color red, a busy painting to move our eyes around, in the shoemaker, and all these paintings. And so the focus on color, the focus on shape, flattened shapes, patterns. Here also you'll see the cigarette that he's holding in his hand. So we see that, different themes throughout these paintings, and can really get a sense of Jacob Lawrence's style. Okay, the last painting by Jacob Lawrence that we're going to look at is actually from 1938. So it's a couple years before the other paintings we were working at. This one's called The Blind Beggars. This one is actually tempera. So the last few paintings we were looking at were all watercolor. This is tempera. It's 20¼ inches by 15 inches. And Jacob Lawrence painted this painting, Blind Beggars, in 1938 while he was working. He was one of the youngest artists actually to work on the Works Progress Administration Federal Art Project. That was part of FDR's New Deal. So he was one of the youngest artists. I think he was 20 years old at the time. And this is one of the paintings he made for that. Here he's showing us a street scene in Harlem, and he's showing us this couple. This is a visually impaired couple. You can see from the glasses that they're wearing, from the canes. And Jacob Lawrence is contrasting the different states of this visually impaired couple as they're walking down the sidewalk, and these carefree, frolicking children who are around them. Notice the children, it looks like they might have come from a parade, because they have some of them are holding flags or drums. Some of them look like they're dancing. So he's really contrasting the, carefulness and seriousness of the couple versus these carefree children. Again, notice the use of color, the use of shape in this painting. And this last painting that we're looking at, we're going to connect very much with Romare Bearden's art, which is the next artist that we're going to look at. Also notice the brick apartment building, which kind of throws into relief the presence of the couple, and it kind of recedes into space. But notice the shapes of the building, the way he depicts the brick building and some of the buildings in back. And just notice the elemental flattened shapes, the highly saturated color, and again, the patterning that we've seen, the repeated patterning that we've seen throughout his works of art. Again, Jacob Lawrence wants all of his works of art to be understood by every viewer, regardless of the background, and really wants to depict life in Harlem through these works of art. And as you can see, he shows us windows, and he even shows us some of the windows, like there's someone looking out of this window, there's a plant in this window. So he's trying to bring the idea of the outside life of Harlem and the inside life of Harlem, and how they were both very important. And we will very much connect this with Romare Bearden's works of art as well. Okay, so that is Jacob Lawrence. So hopefully you got a good feeling for his art, his style, his subject matter. And now we're going to move on to Romare Bearden. So here we're looking at Romare Bearden. He lived from 1911 to 1988. And as I said, he's most well known for collage art. In the background of this picture of him is his most famous work of art. It's called The Block. It is in color, and we'll see it in a couple minutes. But I like to capture the artists with their works of art behind, and choose these pictures to really to see them with their art. And again, Romare Bearden, his technique was really to show us life in Harlem and in other places that he lived through collage. And so we're really going to take a deep look at his collage works of art. So again, this was a very unique medium, collage. It allowed him to densely layer many references and with overlapping meanings and metaphors. He would cut out illustrations from magazines and advertisements. He would paint paper himself and then cut out that paper. And by using collage, he was able to join real and fantastic, large and small scale. You'll see how he plays with scale. He was also connecting interior and exterior worlds, private and public. Romare Bearden and Jacob Lawrence were both fascinated by jazz and the idea of the rhythms of jazz and the intervals and variations. And you'll see how that also plays an important part in his artwork. So the first work of art we're going to look at by Bearden is called The Woodshed. He did this in 1969. And again, it's all made out of cut and pasted, printed and colored papers, photostats, and it's glued on. The size of it is 40 by 50 inches. So this work of art was actually inspired by memories of growing up in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina. And he's showing us here a domestic scene that reflects the strength of Southerners under very difficult and challenging circumstances. So here we can see a family of four. Now, as you're looking at his collages, keep in mind what I said before, that he was really playing with scale, making some things large, something small, inside, outside, interior, exterior. And we'll see that throughout his collages. So we have a family of four here. Here's the father. Here's the mother. The mother's holding a baby, and there's a small child next to her. And I know it's a little bit hard to see some of these because the newspaper and the overlapping of paper, but this is how he intentionally created his collages. So we have this family of four. They're gathered in a rundown shed for a meal and some music. Now we can tell that this is a poor family in a number of ways, and you'll see this in his other artwork. So look carefully at this artwork and then see how this is repeated in his next collage we're going to look at. So you see the bare light bulb, that's showing us that it's a poor family. Also look at the table. There's a plate without any food on it and a spoon. There's a child here that I know it's hard to see, but he's got his fingers in his mouth, which is a symbol of hunger. And the mother, you can see again the quiet strength of Southerners, but in very, very difficult situations. Now, Romare Bearden plays with inside, outside, exterior, interior. It looks like that the mother and the children are inside in this woodshed, which is the name of the work of art. And it appears that the father is outside playing music, perhaps to earn some money. Again, we don't know for sure, but there's an inside-outside play here. The steps also indicate maybe that he's in an outside space. So it's a very carefully structured format with, again, notice the shapes, all the different materials that he cut out, and he's working with different elements of different size, scale, focusing on what he wants to focus on, and also layering different types of paper to create an atmosphere in his paintings. Okay, our next work of art is really Romare Bearden's most famous work of art. It's a huge work of art, and I know it's a little hard to see the way I'm showing it to you now. I will show it to you individually and close up, but this is the full work of art. It's called The Block. It was made in 1971. It is all it's all collage. It's all cut out and torn, printed paper, colored paper, painted paper. It's newspapers, it's magazines. The size of it, which is why I had to squeeze it, I had to minimize it tremendously to fit it onto my screen. The dimensions are 48 inches high and it's 18 feet long. It's a huge work of art, but you can see that it's broken into 6 panels. You can probably see the lines down each of the panels. So in a couple of minutes, I will show you each panel individually so we can see the details. But before I do that, I just want you to get an overall feel of this work of art. Of course, it's a tribute to Harlem, which was, of course, a neighborhood in New York City that nurtured both the life and work of Romare Bearden and the other artists we're looking at today. Even though he was born in Charlotte, North Carolina, he spent time in New York growing up, and then he moved to Harlem. In 1940, he had his first studio in Harlem. That's when he had a studio in the same building at Jacob Lawrence at 33 West 125th Street. During the 1940s, Bearden was very involved in the Harlem cultural community. He was part of the 306 group. He was a member of the Harlem Artists Guild, as was Jacob Lawrence. So Harlem was very important to him. And here he does a whole work of art based on a specific block in Harlem. And this is Lenox Avenue between 132nd and 133rd Streets. That's where he had his studio. And this is what it's based on. Now, the location and activity could be any Harlem scene. And it's a panorama. It's supposed to evoke not just the sights of Harlem, but also the sounds of Harlem. We have street traffic. We have open windows with televisions blaring. We have people playing music on the street. So it's supposed to really, Bearden once referred to this collage as a collage with sound, because you're really supposed to imagine the sounds that come out here. And each of the 6 panels of the block represents an aspect of life in Harlem. It includes neighborhood institutions. There's a church in here. There's a barber shop. There's a corner grocery store. And I'll show them to you carefully. And he took artistic license also to reveal the inner lives of tenement life and also the exuberant humanity that existed on the street. He was certainly influenced by Cubist art. You can see all the different shapes in his cut paper collage. It's just really an incredibly detailed, exuberant, colorful work of art. So I want to look at each panel close up. Before I do that, I'll let you know we're going to start with a panel all the way on the right. You can see it says liquors on it. So we're going to look at that panel first. But I want you really to get an overall feel of how the work of art looks when all the panels are supposed to be together. But I'll show them to you panel by panel so we can see details. But again, notice the color, the shapes, looking into different windows at what's going on and really getting a feel for what life was like. As we're going to see, the happiness, the tragedy, all the things that went on in life in Harlem. Okay, so here's our first panel, so you can see it much closer up. So again, as we're looking, I'm not going to point it out all the panels, but notice the colors, the shapes, the inside versus outside, interior life versus exterior life, and also the different sizes of everything and what he's trying to emphasize. So here we have the corner of the street. We can see some of the cars, so the idea of the noise coming from the street, people. The way these blocks work in Harlem and also throughout Manhattan is you often have like the stores on the bottom level, and then you have people living above that. So here we have a corner grocery, but they're advertising, liquors. And then we can peer into the window of this apartment, and there are 2 children here, and they're in black and white. And then the thing that's very large, oversized, is this mouse trap. And of course, that's telling us about what life was like. There's certainly in any city. I lived in New York for a few years, and there's definitely a lot of mice, especially if you live above a restaurant or store. But he's showing that this is a real issue and a real problem by making, he manipulates sizes of things throughout his collages. So you can see how large the mouse trap is compared to the people in the collage. Then he also shows us, someone sitting on a stoop, which would happen a lot, people sitting outside, people gathering on the street. We can also see, the New York skyline a little bit in the background. Again, the shapes, sizes, patterns throughout his work of art. Okay, our second panel, we have a funeral going on here. So there's a funeral parlor here. You can see people are actually gathered around a coffin, and here we have a hearse over here. And again, this was based on things that he would see living in Harlem. And we're going to watch a video about Jacob Lawrence after we look at the work of art, and he'll describe how he saw these scenes and then drew them and then made them out of collage. So we have a funeral parlor here. Some people involved in the funeral, some people on the street. And then what you have up here are angels. These are Ethiopian angels, and they're escorting the body up to heaven. So that's what he's showing us here. Again, the shapes, the colors, and really representing what life was like on the street in Harlem. Our next section, you can see the bottom floor. We have a barber shop with the symbol of a barber shop over here. Again, the idea of inside, outside, street life versus private life. So we have someone reading a book, but leaning out the window and talking to this woman on the street. So, the connection between street life and home life. In this window, we have another one of these Ethiopian angels, and she is touching a pregnant woman's body. Perhaps this is supposed to be a Madonna and child, or just depicting the idea of, what life that was going on in these apartment buildings. Okay, our next panel has on the bottom level a church, Sunrise Baptist. In this window, we have a preacher. We also have, in the colorful collage above the church, we have 2 candles, some kind of prayer book. We have the rosary beads here, another preacher. And then above the church, again, we're peering into someone's apartment, and you'll recognize this oversized light bulb that's not covered, which tells us about the poverty of the family living in this apartment. And again, look how he manipulated sizes to emphasize a point where the light bulb is bigger than the people. And then we're peering into this window and seeing someone getting out of bed. So again, we're peering into people's lives. We're getting a sense of the private lives and public lives of people in this Harlem neighborhood. We also have people on the street, and we have someone here sleeping on the street. So again, he's showing us the vibrancy of life, the vitality, but also the difficulties and the hardness of life. In our next panel, we have, again, we're peering into people's lives. We have 2 children looking at the window onto the street where a lot of people are gathered. Perhaps they're wishing they could be outside. We also have a couple being intimate over here. So again, the interplay with public and private lives. And our last panel is another barbershop. Here we have the Mirror Barbershop. We have a lot of people on the street. We have some people playing music. So again, the importance of jazz music, people playing music, people gathering, fire hydrant over here. We have 2 people dancing over here. So again, the vibrancy of life, but also the difficulties of life, peering into the windows. We can see people watching TV over here. Here's a woman taking a bath in her apartment. So again, this is Jacob Lawrence. It's really a very vibrant, it's a moral-sized tableau. Again, he did it in 1971. And this is the whole 18-foot-long collage celebrating his Harlem neighborhood. Again, very colorful, very elaborate, abstract forms, flattened shapes also, and shifts in perspective and scale, as we saw where he focused on certain things more than other things. Now, what's interesting about this work of art is that Jacob Lawrence did not create any sound to go with it. He wanted us to use our imagination. And as he said it was like a collage with sound, but he really wanted us to use our imagination to imagine the sounds that came from the scene, the traffic, the TV blaring, the people on the street dancing, the jazz music. So he made it in 1971. And when it was first shown, there was actually a curator who decided that there should be an audio tape playing while you were looking at this work of art. It wasn't Bearden's idea to have an audio tape. It was the curator's idea, which I think is definitely curatorial overreach. But Bearden went along with it. He was fine with it. So it was originally shown with a cassette tape. Although Bearden was not involved with the recording or the manufacture of the soundtrack, but the original installation did include a tape recording with street sounds. The Met acquired the block in 1978, 7 years after it was made. And when they acquired it, they did get the audio tape as part of the work of art. But somehow the audio tape was lost after they got it. The collage was exhibited, was never exhibited with its soundtrack at the Met because they lost it. And somehow, I don't know how, but in the year 2024, the audio tape was rediscovered in the Museum of Modern Art. So nobody knows how it got there, how the Met lost track of it, how it got to the Museum of Modern Art. But in 2024, it was found, and that was very exciting. Anyway, I have a recording of the audio tape. It goes for 8 minutes. We're just going to listen to a couple seconds of it. But what I want to do is I want to play the audio tape while you're looking at the collage. And afterwards, during maybe the question and answer part of it, I would love to hear your thoughts about if you think that the audio tape adds to the work of art, or if you think it takes away. Again, Romare Bearden did not produce the audio tape, but he did go along with, he allowed it to be played when the work of art was first shown in 1971. But I will love to hear at the end if you think it enhances it or if it takes away. I'm going to go to another screen just to play the audio tape, and then I'll show you the audio. I'll come back to this screen so you can look at the work of art while hearing the sounds and tell me what you think.
That's too bad. Look how that's amazing. Woo! 21. Woo! Don't nobody move. Don't nobody move. Yeah, man, what's up? Woo! All right, one more. Get one bar. I am good.
Okay, so I always like to show it without the sound first and then with the sound. And as I said, at the end, we'll hopefully people will share what they think about the sound with the work of art. I've never viewed the block in person with the soundtrack because the Met has never done that. But whether you view it with or without the street sound accompanying it, you certainly feel the vitality of the scene, whether you imagine it on your own or whether you hear the video clip. Now, the other thing you should know about this work of art is that the Met acquired it in 1978, 7 years after it was made as a gift. However, it is rarely on view due to its fragility. Remember, it's made out of cutout newspapers and magazines and painted papers, and a lot of the papers are sensitive to light. So the curators in the museum have to limit the time it's on display to protect it from irreversible fading and decay. So it's only shown for sometimes a few months at a time and only every few years. I started working at the Met in the late 1990s, and I remember seeing it on view then. And it was on view more then than later on. I think they realized how sensitive the papers really were to light. I know it was exhibited in an exhibit in 2004. It was there was an exhibit called Romare Bearden at the Met. It was also exhibited in 2011 in an exhibit, Romare Bearden, a Centennial Celebration. It was last on view exactly 2 years ago, February 2024 through July 2024, in an exhibit called the Harlem Renaissance and Transatlantic Modernism, which actually had a lot of these works of art that we're seeing today in that exhibit. But as you see, it is not on view very often, which is unfortunate because it's such an amazing work of art. But luckily, we do have it online that we can see it and study it. Okay, so that is Romare Bearden's very famous The Block. And we are now going to look at a short video clip of Romare Bearden talking about his art, talking a little bit about his inspiration for the block, his inspiration for his artwork, and seeing him make his collage, which I think really sheds light on his process. Oh, you know what? Before we do that, actually, let me do this, and then we'll look at the video. This is actually a photograph of the block in Harlem that Romare Bearden based his collage on, and it's Lenox Avenue between 132nd and 133rd Streets. So you can see the block that he based the collage on. And now I minimize both of these images and put them top to bottom so you can really see and get an idea of the block that his studio is on, the block that he was basing it on. Again, it could really be any block in Harlem. That's what he wanted it, but this was really the specific block that he was thinking of. Okay, and here's the video, and we'll hear Romare Bearden talking in his own words and seeing him in his process.
When I first began to do collages, I had no idea that I was going to develop certain symbols that have run through my work, like the train, the serpent, the guitar. But these were all natural things that I saw in the life around Mecklenburg County in North Carolina. I used the train because so many of the lives of black people had to do with the trade. So these are the elements of my environment. That's right. You know, we looked at, this was just a jumping off point when we did out there, you know, the liquor store. You remember I did a drawing out there, Al, of the, but just something like this was enough to get me started, you know, on what I later did. You know, the funeral parlor right there, there was a funeral going on at that time. I guess the guy's very busy. And I made it like Ethiopian angels or something up there receiving the lady. And then I imagined, let's say there was a family eating, a little boy up there, and I put the big electric light bulb and the other figures in sitting around eating, and then just this little note was enough. But looking at those buildings now, Al, look at this. See that one, those two red ones? Right. And this one a little longer. Actually, what I'm doing here is making a keyboard. Now, we're already defining this as a musical composition. Right. And then you have to look for things that repeat themselves. You see these triangular movements. Did you get these here? And then the first thing you know, you have a sonata. And this is what I have tried to do in my collages, to bring the Afro-American experience into art and give it a universal dimension.
Okay, so hopefully everyone could really see his process. I love seeing him with the scissors and also gluing the collage and layering everything, and you really understand his process, and seeing him draw all the shapes for the block. And I think it's so interesting to hear artists speak about their works of art in their own words. Okay, so our final artist that we're going to look at today is Faith Ringgold. Here's a picture of her, and she's our final modern storyteller that we're going to talk about today. So as you saw, like Jacob Lawrence and Romare Bearden, she also shared an equally acute social conscious. She, though, explores not just life in Harlem and the African-American experience, but she also explores feminism and race relations and family. She started working in the 1950s, and she worked throughout close to when she passed away in 2024. A lot of her works of art are grounded in political commentary. Some of her works of art are stinging commentaries on the marginalization of Blacks in America. Some of her works of art celebrate Black historical and cultural figures, such as Martin Luther King and other figures. In the late 1970s, though, she turned to celebrating the lives of ordinary people from her neighborhood in Harlem. So you see this common theme. She developed stories and narratives about African Americans, about Black feminists, and she started making painted quilts in 1983. And you can see her here, a picture of her with her craft. Her painted quilts investigate race and feminism through detailed fictional storylines. So there's stories going on in all of her quilts, and a lot of the stories are based on her own experience. Now, she pushes the boundaries of traditional fine art. I think all three of these artists push the tradition of the boundaries of traditional fine art, right? Bearden through his collage, Jacob Lawrence through his choice of painting materials, and Faith Ringgold through her use of cloth as a medium. And she uses cloth for another number of reasons. By the way, she started painted quilts in 1983. So before that, she was doing painting, she was doing jewelry making, she was doing all kinds of art. But she started these painting quilts in 1983. And through them, she expresses her feminism and her identity as an African-American woman in this choice of material. Again, because her mother and her grandmother were both involved in quilting and sewing. But there were also economic issues that impacted why she chose this medium. She first started making cloth works because they were easy to store and easy to transport. And she would have these trunk shows of her work to exhibit at universities and other spaces. This way she could bypass a middleman, like an art dealer, and and because her quilts you were able to fold them up and transport them in, suitcases, things like that. They don't take up a lot of space. They can be folded and put away, and she could transport them herself and hang them herself and store them easily. That was an economic reason for her also that she developed these quilts. So she quilted and then she painted on the quilts, and she also wrote elaborate text on the fabrics, as we'll see in some of her quilts. Okay, now her works of art, like the block that we're looking at, this is very large. So I had to condense it to fit onto the screen. And also, this one I actually don't have close-ups of, but the size of it is 90 inches tall by 12 feet long. So it's a huge quilt, and she called these quilts story quilts. This one specifically is called the street story quilt, and it's cotton canvas. It has acrylic paint, it has ink marker, it has dyed and print cottons, it has sequins and all different things sewn onto it. And with this street story quilt, it's one of her most powerful story quilts that she did this in 1985. And the idea, like the block, which very much connects to the block, is looking at these apartment buildings in Harlem and learning about the people in them, learning about the community, and about life, both the tragedies, the difficulties, and the celebrations of life. It's a triptych, so it's 3 different buildings, that you see here. And it not only has the same that we saw in the block, where you can peer into people's windows and see people and see some of the things they're experiencing, but also underneath each window is words that are written telling a little bit about each of these families. Now, again, these are they're based on true stories, but it's more like fictional stories based on things she saw around her, but they're not exactly things that happened. And again, she's really trying to tell us about life in Harlem and what life was like there for the people who live there. And again, it's a fictional narrative, but it's inspired by real life experiences, the themes of urban life, of urban difficulties, but also the celebration of life in Harlem. So the Met actually acquired this. This quilt was made in 1985, and the Met acquired it in 1990. Again, by a curator who championed the acquisition of works of art by artists of color and also by women artists. Okay, the next work of art by Faith Ringgold is, by the way, her works of art, like Bearden, are rarely on view. So again, this is at the Met, and the next work of art we're going to look at, they are rarely on view due to the sensitive nature of the materials, and they can't be exposed to light for prolonged periods of time. Okay, the next work of art is actually a painting done by Faith Ringgold. It's called Freedom of Speech, and it was done in 1990. And this is actually a watercolor acrylic paint painting. It's 24 inches by 36 inches. And this was actually commissioned by the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia as a poster design for a 1991 exhibition. And you can see what it was commemorating. You can see on the top here, it was the 200th anniversary of the Bill of Rights. So that's what she made this freedom of speech for the 200th anniversary of the Bill of Rights. So you can see what she did here. So she uses the basis of the American flag. On the red part of the flag, she paints the words of the First Amendment, which you can read here. And of course, the First Amendment protects freedom of speech, of religious practice, peaceful assembly, and the lawful redress of grievances. And she paints the words of the First Amendment on the red stripes of the American flag. Then over the stars, and also over the white stripes, although this part is a little bit hard to see, but you can definitely see the part over the stars, she names individuals and groups who are either perpetrators or victims of breaches of these freedoms. So either people who supported the Bill of Rights in her eyes, or people who breached the Bill of Rights in her eyes throughout history. And she writes those names over here. A lot of them overlap, but you can see, and again, it's people and individuals both who support, but also who breach these freedoms. So you can see we have the KKK, we have Harriet Tubman, and things are repeated. You can see names and organizations that are repeated. KKK, we have Dred Scott, we have Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., we have Rosa Parks, we have Ella Baker, we have Malcolm X, we have, what else? Senator Jesse Helms, the Black Panther Party. And again, a lot of them are repeated. The American Nazi Party, Ku Klux Klan, B'nai B'rith. So this is what she created. And you can see through this work of art that she was very much, a number of her works of art were, had political background or her trying to champion the rights of different people. Okay, our last work of art that we're going to look at by Faith Ringgold is actually not at the Met, but it's probably her most famous story quilt. So I wanted to include it. This is actually at the Guggenheim, although again, it's rarely on view. It's called Tar Beach. There's actually a children's book based on this quilt. And this quilt is part of a series entitled Women on a Bridge. This was made in 1988. And again, all these story quilts are fictional, based on stories and characters, but fictional stories and characters, but things that she saw around her. And again, it's acrylic paint on these on quilted materials. And this is the first quilt in her series called Women on a Bridge. Look at the details. Again, all these works of art by the different artists are really connecting us to different aspects of life in Harlem. So this shows us a family on the roof of their building in Harlem. Again, the work of art is called Tar Beach. And this is something that people would do often, especially in the summer in Harlem, where it could be a little cooler on the roof and you could get a breeze. And so we see this family, and it's a story, again, a fictional story based on this girl. Her name is Cassie Louise Lightfoot. She's with her family and her neighbors on their rooftop, or what they called their Tar Beach. You can see she's lying here on a blanket with her brother, looking up at the sky. Her parents and their neighbors are playing cards, and there's a whole picnic table set up here with different picnic foods. And you can see exactly where they are, because you can see in the background the George Washington Bridge and the stars above it. And this is, again, Cassie Louise Lightfoot. You can see her braids here, and her braids are here, and she's flying over the George Washington Bridge. And this is the quilt really depicts the fantasies of this Cassie Louise Lightfoot, who on this summer night in Harlem is flying over the George Washington Bridge. And for Faith Ringgold, the idea of flight was the idea of freedom. And actually, there's a whole story written here on the bottom based on the imagination of Cassie Louise Lightfoot. And part of it says, I'll quote you from part of it. And again, there's a whole children's book which tells the whole story. But she says, quote, "Sleeping on Tar Beach was magical." She says, "I was only 8 years old and in the 3rd grade, and here I can fly. That means I'm free to go wherever I want for the rest of my life." So for Faith Ringgold, the idea of flight really represented freedom and the potential for freedom and for self-possession. So Faith Ringgold in this series entitled Women on a Bridge often shows women flying to show the freedom that she hopes that women would achieve. Okay, before we get to question time, I just want to show you a short video clip of Faith Ringgold. The video is 8 minutes. We're just going to watch the first minute. Again, these are all videos that you can find on YouTube and watch the rest of it, but I think it's interesting to hear her speak about her art in her own words. And again, she died at 93, and she was in 2024, and she was really working almost until the time that she died.
We all may have different truths. Art is a unique expression of life.
Faith Ringgold has opened the door for Black women artists who now proliferate. She made the world sit up and take notice.
Faith created a massive body of work. She's worked in oil paint, acrylic paint, fabric, soft sculptures, prints and multiples. She would do performances.
See the old people, look at their faces.
She really is an artist who lives to work. She makes art that speaks of herself and of her own experience.
Yeah, I got a lot to do on this.
In a lot of ways, I have always wanted to have a voice, to have something to say about the world and to feel some sense of power.
I enjoy expressing the world as I see it. There is such a thing as freedom, especially in America. I was born in Harlem on 146th Street. We traveled, and my family was very interested in education. They tried to make me as knowledgeable about different parts of the country and what was going on. And it was just a determination on my part to not be told who I am and what I can do.
She inherited from her mother an indomitable strength. Faith was raising her two daughters by herself, trying to be an artist and working full-time as an art teacher, and she incorporated all of those experiences.
Here it is.
Particularly with the American People series, her interactions with liberal whites.
White power, black power. Yes, indeed. Black power.
Okay, so that's a little bit of the video, and if anyone's interested in watching the rest, I could send a link. It's about 8 more minutes to this video. Okay, so I am going to end with that, and hopefully everyone learned something new about these 3 artists and their connections between their artwork representing life in Harlem and also their unique art forms that they each and their medium that they each use to express their lives and what life was like in Harlem while they were living and working there.
Thank you, Elana. First of all, I'd like to start off with you taking a look at the chat room because there's several comments in there that might be of interest. Are you able to see them?
Yes. Great.
So I don't know whether the comment about the St. Louis Art Museum, there's a quote there apparently, says I think. Do you know if that's true?
You know what? It's funny. I usually check what the St. Louis Art Museum has, but I didn't do that this time. So I'm not sure, but it could definitely be.
So you also have a question about the size of the block collage.
Yes. So the block collage is 48 inches high and 18 feet long.
Okay. And you had a couple of comments also about the street sounds. I think you can see Joanne said she loved having the street sound. And there's a person who's in person here at the Mirowitz Center watching this on the big screen. And her comment was, the audio enhances the viewing of Romare's artwork. Thoroughly enjoyed the presentation. That was from Melinda.
Oh, great. Okay.
So I don't know. My guess is the consensus was unanimous that the street sounds were very effective, but there might be some people out, who have.
Yeah, if anyone wants to unmute or put in what they think, I've shown it a couple times and I've gotten a very mixed reaction. Some people like the street sounds, some people feel like it takes away, and they want to just imagine the street sounds. So I think it's interesting to me that the artist did not create the street sounds, but he allowed the audio cassette to be played on the original installation.
Also, there was a question, did he ever do a self-portrait?
Bearden.
Yeah, for Bearden.
I don't know. Not that I'm familiar with, but I'm not sure.
Okay, it looks okay. You have a question? Go ahead. I see your hand up.
This is in relation to the Bearden self-portrait. I've studied him in another thing that I belong to, and he may have been biracial, but he was very white looking, so he could go places and pass into areas that other Black artists couldn't. And one of the pictures you showed, he was very, 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 so he could pass for white. And he was in in semi-professional baseball, and he was asked to join a more professional one that was a white baseball team, and he said no, he didn't really want to keep trying to pass for white. So I think that's interesting because I do study that kind of stuff. So
Yes, he was asked to join a professional baseball league, but they said to him only if he passes himself off as white, and he refused. Yeah. And as we were talking, I just looked up about a self-portrait. He did do a self-portrait. It's called Artist with Painting and Model in 1981. It's a collage, of course. And it shows him in the 1940s in his Harlem studio. That's the only kind of direct, recognizable self-portrait that he created. So it's not at the Met, but you can look it up. It's called Artist with Painting and Model, 1981 by Romare Bearden.
Okay, thank you.
You also got another comment just now, Elana. Street sounds take away from the viewer's imagination. So there you go. There's another perspective.
I think I've heard both, and I'm always curious to hear what people think about it. But I think it's great. It's fun that they just 2 years ago found the audio cassette. I mean, it'd been missing since 1979, I think.
Right.
So it's fun that it's now accessible. So at least you can listen to it and have that option.
So also, I just wanted, before we wrap up, to share that this is a new program that Elana put together recently, and we were lucky to be on the short list of her presentations. So she shared this with us, and it's really unique and just perfect for Black History Month. But just perfect because the art is just stunning. I was thinking as I was watching your images that the word that kept coming to my mind was muscular, very strong. There's a lot of strength in all of the images, and it's really wonderful. Thank you for putting it all together.
My pleasure.
Okay, if anybody else has any questions, we're going to wrap up. And this, like I said, this is the final part 3 of a 3-part series. And Elana, thank you so much. We really appreciate you being part of our community.
My pleasure.
It was great. It was really great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone.